Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, December 10th. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. This past week saw Elon Musk work his relationship with Donald Trump both at home and abroad. He went to Capitol Hill to lobby lawmakers with his partner in DOGE, Vivek Ramaswamy, late last week, and then joined the president-elect in Paris for the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. To break down how he's spending his political capital, we are joined by Business Week's man in D.C., Josh Green. Hey there, Josh.
Good to be with you.
And we have our regulars, Max Chafkin and Dana Hull. Hey, Max.
Hey, David.
Dana.
Hi, David.
Then we're going to take another look at how the Trump trade continues to send Elon's companies to dizzying new heights. And Max, at long last, thinks he has finally spotted a new feud brewing. It's about time, pal. But hold on. Not quite yet, Max. You're going to tell us all about that feud later. Josh, so on Friday, Elon took himself and, of course, his toddler child X to Capitol Hill. Do we have a sense of how the meetings went and what came out of it all?
Yeah, I mean, my impression just from talking to people around town is this was really kind of introductory stuff, right? They weren't putting on the green eye shades and sort of breaking down what exactly they want to cut in the budget. But Elon, I think, has caused more of an uproar in lobbying circles in Washington than he has necessarily in government circles, because anytime a new administration comes in, businesses get very excited. Some of them get very worried. And the fact that we now have this kind of DOGE collaboration is something new that I think a lot of businesses are worried about. And so there's been a flurry of lobbyists trying to figure out, okay, in any normal administration, we'd be trying to make relationships with the Trump guys. How do we get a line into Elon Musk? And how
do we essentially lobby Elon Musk himself?
Do you tag him on X? That's how you get to him.
That'll be $100,000, Josh.
Yeah, but just as speaking to a lobbyist sort of said sardonically, like, it's not like you can book an appointment with him, right? The way you can, like with a congressman or somebody in the White House. And so some of the thinking has been, well, look, we should start booking our CEOs on like Joe Rogan's podcast or some other kind of right-leaning podcast that Elon might listen to or get excited about. Maybe that's a new way to kind of
So, Josh,
influence.
this is like when you wanted to speak to Trump and Trump 1.0, you'd have to like go on Fox or something like that. Maybe you will again now.
Yeah, people would like buy ads just in the Palm Beach market for Fox News in hopes that Trump would see that ad. Yeah, I do think there's a similar dynamic here with Elon. People don't know what to make of him, but they know enough, businesses do, to know that they probably don't want to wind up in his crosshairs. And so the thinking among lobbyists is like, what can we do to ensure that doesn't happen?
Now, Max, I know that you have long been unsure at just how much the great DOGE committee managed to get done in terms of redoing government and cutting spending. And the question's always been, well, what kind of leverage do they actually have? And something that I was reading up in the aftermath of those meetings that I saw came out was that Messrs. Musk and Ramaswamy were apparently pretty blunt and forthright in saying to lawmakers, hey, if you guys drag your feet on what we're trying to get done, we're going to publicly shame you. Perhaps that is a lever that they can pull and get something done.
I mean, Josh will have a sense of this too, but I mean, I think that is leverage. And of course, Elon Musk has said himself that there will be not just public shaming, but perhaps funding of primary challenges and creating actual costs to lawmakers who oppose, what they see as Trump's agenda or whatever. On the other hand, like, appropriations are really important in Congress. Anytime you're cutting spending, like, you're potentially creating like a very PO'd constituency, like whichever company is in that district or whatever, whoever represents that district, like it's not going to be like they can just do whatever they want.
Yeah. Josh, will they react and respond to that kind of pressure?
I think to a degree, having that kind of spotlight might be uncomfortable for a Republican member of Congress. But, as I've written in Business Week, Elon is already enemy number one for Democrats. So the idea, the thought of Elon criticizing a Democratic congressman is not something that strikes terror in their hearts. Right. I think the challenge that the DOGE guys are going to have is sort of twofold. Number one, they don't have any actual power other than the power to sort of publicly pressure that Elon was talking about. They need Congress to act. And Republicans now have the narrowest majority in the House of Representatives that they've had in my lifetime. So he is literally going to have to bring along just about every single Republican congressman on board to get anything done. And as anybody who's paid any attention to Washington the last decade or so, that's like herding cats under good circumstances without the kind of Elon chaos element injecting itself into the process. But I think the other problem, this is something that Max alluded to, is I think in the abstract, Republicans are all in on the idea to slash government spending and cut this and that. The problem is going to be when they start enumerating. If those cuts hit in Republican districts, it's not so much the companies that are going to get mad. They will. But it's going to be the elected officials themselves, right? If you go in, Elon has said he wants to cut the Department of Education. If you go into any rural Republican district and wipe out, like, let's say 200 teachers, that Republican congressman probably isn't going to get reelected. And so they're going to put their foot down there. So I think that Elon has maybe a naive idea of what he's actually going to be able to accomplish, even through public pressure against some of these Republicans who might dig in their heels once they see their own jobs and livelihoods threatened.
One thing also, and we learned this, during the presidential campaign, like Elon Musk's politics, although they are very Trumpy, are not necessarily perfectly aligned with Donald Trump. Or with Republicans, and like they're
the CEO of the world's most valuable EV
cutting
company.
The Department of Education, that seems like low hanging fruit compared to some of the other things that he has hinted at or suggested at. There have been these like weird alliances. Bernie Sanders tweeted, "Oh yeah, this is going to be great. We're going to cut the Defense Department budget," and Elon is kind of is engaging with Bernie, and it's like, okay, good luck with that one.
Well, Max, I mean, it's something that's come up in the last 24 hours as a way to get DOGE rolling. And I got to say, I myself am 100% behind this, is permanent daylight savings time. They're on this, right? Josh, this is going through. This is going to happen. No more falling back in, November. That's it. Sunshine. Well, not quite sunshine, but later sunsets throughout the year. Come on. You can't be against that.
No. We should get rid of daylight savings time. I feel like we all agree that's
permanent daylight savings.
But I do think there's something interesting happening, which is in addition to public shaming, he's kind of created this space for people to propose stuff that's either ambitious or just weird and kind of kooky. I saw another, I think it was a Democratic politician trying to get DOGE's attention to get rid of the penny, which and to replace dollar bills with dollar coins.
The penny will disappear at some point. Do you own any pennies?
They're like in my sock drawer or something in a jar.
I feel like the DOGE's biggest impact right now has just been striking fear into the heart of federal workers, right? I mean, in their Wall Street Journal op-ed, Elon and Vivek kind of laid out this whole idea that everyone should be back in the office 5 days a week. And Elon has been hammering over and over again about how, why are federal workers still working from home and why are all these federal offices empty? And if people don't want to come back to the office, then they can just quit and put in for early retirement. And I think that the RTO aspect of this is something that they could really pressure agencies to do, or that with Congress's help, they could pressure agencies to do. And that is something that, that could have a real impact. And then you have to imagine that all of the political appointees are, either resigning or they're about to resign. But then the civil staff, it's like if you've been at the EPA for 30 years, what do you do now? Do you stay there and stay quiet and try to gum up the works and protect what you can? Or do you run for the exits? I mean, you're going to see real wholesale shifts in a lot of these agencies.
Now, Josh, on the remote work thing, because in general, I would say from what I've been able to gather, there weren't a whole lot of nitty-gritty specifics in the meeting on Friday. It was sort of more broad brush kind of conceptual stuff. But that was something that indeed came up, was this idea that you'll bring an end to remote work, allowing federal employees to work remotely, indeed inducing some to quit. And then as this theory goes, or as this gambit would go, you then consolidate real estate and sell off vacant buildings.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's some good sense to sort of what Elon is proposing there. And I actually think that he would have a number of Democratic allies in Washington on the idea of ending right to work. I work in Bloomberg in downtown D.C., and it has been like a ghost town since COVID. You know, businesses have shuttered, restaurants have shuttered. You see about half the people around here. The city's budget is, in misery because they don't have the kind of traffic down here that they once did. There's a lot of resentment among people that work in the private sector here who can't just do work from home all the time. So, look, there are some adjustments. I guess we can throw daylight savings time in the hopper. It might make a lot of sense.
It's happening, Josh.
I wouldn't write it off entirely. But yeah, look, if Elon and Vivek can sort of settle on things where there's a clear constituency, where they can build a political coalition, maybe even in the case of this defense spending, one that includes a Democrat like Bernie Sanders, although I'm skeptical that that's going to get over the finish line. That's really the trick to the way these commissions work. There's a long history of what's happening with DOGE, where an administration will bring in businessmen to sit down and apply their expertise to the federal budget. I did some research, and it goes all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt in 1905. They've had people kind of come in, try and get the accounts in order, and more often than not, those projects fail, or they mostly fail. And so that's kind of what I'm expecting to happen here with DOGE. But with Republicans in complete control of Congress, with Elon having the megaphone, with President-elect Trump presumably on board, I do expect that they'll get at least some token victories, whether that's, wiping out a part of the federal workforce, bringing everybody back to work, maybe consolidating a couple sub agencies into one and saving some money on paper.
$2 trillion in savings a year, which is what they're talking about. That ain't happening.
It's not going to happen. I sort of geeked out on this a little bit. The two most recent examples is Ronald Reagan in 1982 put together this thing called the Grace Commission. They brought in Peter Grace, with the CEO of W.R. Grace and Company, big chemical company, had his sort of DOGE of the 80s, and they came up with 2,500 proposals for cutting the federal government. They were trying to cut about $500 billion over 3 years. A lot of money for back then.
And they cut?
The CBO audited this after the fact. They wound up cutting less than $70 billion over 5 years, which is 1.4% of the federal budget. So that gives you an idea of what a kind of sober Republican business leader in the 1980s could accomplish.
Part of the challenge here is it's not clear what DOGE is trying to do. We've heard different goals articulated at different times. So you brought up one, David, which is to cut $2 trillion or some huge number from the federal budget. Another is just to make government more efficient and in the sense of not necessarily immediately cutting huge costs, but like setting it up for success. Because and I think the work from home thing would probably fit more easily into that bracket rather than like instant cost savings. There's not going to be a huge and immediate cost savings of laying a bunch of people off, I don't think. And so, or, not on the $2 trillion scale anyway. And then there's this third idea, which Howard Lutnick has brought up at various times, and Elon Musk himself.
Howard Lutnick being
the Commerce Secretary designee, the person Trump has said is going to run the Commerce Department and who was a co-chair of Trump's transition. Right. But anyway, there's this third idea, which is that Elon Musk is just going to create better software for the federal government. Sort of
I heard him. I saw him.
Let's just bring in some smart software engineers and they're going to, that's going to fix it.
Wasn't he eeksing the other day about how crappy government computers are?
He was sort of saying he's going to be the head of IT.
It must be lousy, right?
By the way, he's not wrong about any of this. I mean, it is like there's government software that was like programmed in the 80s that doesn't even exist anymore, but there's sort of like a few lone engineers on hand to like fix it. I mean, it's appalling. If he could actually accomplish something on that front, he would be doing a great public service. But again, raising my hand here, big skeptic that's going to wind up being the effect of this.
The other thing I want to caution about is that you're going to likely see bloat in certain agencies. Like, so Trump campaigned on immigration and securing the border and deporting, 15 million undocumented workers. So how does that program, if it comes to pass, actually get enacted? You're going to need to have border, you're going to potentially need to hire more Border Patrol agents and more, people with ICE and DHS. And so I just imagine that certain departments are going to grow under Trump 2.0.
For sure. There will definitely be some contradictions there in that sense. There's no doubt there are going to be some agencies, Dana, that
I actually disagree with that. Can I tell you guys why?
Sure.
Please do.
Well, look,
yes.
I mean, going back to Reagan in the 80s, there's been this pressure among politicians of both parties to shrink government. And the way that politicians in both parties get around this is by outsourcing things to the private sector. So I've been doing a little bit of reporting on how this grand deportation plan would work. Stephen Miller, one of the incoming president's top assistant, who's really kind of driving this deportation idea, has talked about building camps to house all these people in. And in speaking to Republicans, they're not planning on having government workers build these camps. It's going to be like Halliburton or something like that. So the budgets for these departments will certainly expand, to Dana's point. But I think actually what they're going to do is hire a lot of people in the private sector. And I think that sort of goes to Elon's idea that, government bureaucrats are dummies who can't accomplish anything, but the creative destruction and energy of the private sector can help to achieve all of Trump's goals.
And you've definitely seen that, by the way, because part of the Trump trade has been a surge in the share prices, the stock prices of some of these private prisons. Okay, but we need to go abroad for a second. Musk accompanying Trump to Paris for the reopening of Notre Dame. And then, recently at Mar-a-Lago, Musk was there with Trump when he hosted the leader of Hungary, Victor Orban. Max, we've talked about geopolitical Musk before, but man, I know Marco Rubio is going to, by name, be the next Secretary of State, but geez, it feels like it's Elon Musk.
We've talked on this podcast. Elon Musk, has relationships with a lot of Dan is always pointing this out, but, has relationships with a lot of these people. He and Giorgia Meloni, the leader of Italy, have a friendship that appears to be, really solid. He's talked to Macron. He's somebody who likes this. And I also he's the first buddy. I guess my takeaway from this little trip is that status, which we've been on the lookout, I have been on Feud Watch from November 5th to see any signs of any kind of fracturing. And look, it's that relationship, the relationship between Elon Musk and Trump is still solid. That's my takeaway from this trip.
Yeah, and I sort of think we talk about geopolitical Elon. I think of Elon as like a trans-state actor, right? Like he has relationships that transcend the United States government. He knows, Bolsonaro and Milei and Orban and Meloni and Macron on his own because he's talked to them about everything from population control and declining birth rates to like space and, space programs. And so, but for him to be at Notre Dame, and he was like posting photographs of the, video of the cathedral on his X account, it was almost like he was there with other heads of state. And it was just sort of, you see this sort of cathedral full of government officials from all around the world, and then there's Elon and no J.D. Vance. It was just very striking. It's like his role in the Trump administration is really being cemented in these, key kind of photo op moments.
This is why you put $250 million into a presidential campaign, because you get to go to the cool reopening of Notre Dame.
How much money did J.D. Vance put into the campaign?
And also, he has, this is something that he stands to gain from this, whatever happens with Trump, right? This is like an opportunity to sell himself, to sell Starlink, to, sell whatever other tunnels to heads of state to continue to protect and project his, business influence.
Josh, what's your read, though, about just how strong and solid that relationship is between Musk and Trump?
I've been surprised. I was very much expecting the feud, too, just based on Trump's history with people who try and elbow their way into the spotlight. But one factor, I think, is I was talking to somebody really close to Trump down in Mar-a-Lago who said, Trump has really been checked out of this whole process. Like, he doesn't really want to go to Washington. He likes being in Mar-a-Lago. He's going to spend summers in his club in Bedminster, and everything that you see kind of happening, he's just sort of letting the mice run around loose. And Elon, I think, is one of those people. I think that Trump also loves the fact that he's surrounded by rich people and that Elon is the richest person. Like, I had not appreciated the degree to which that matters to Trump's psyche. And somebody published the other day, like, a list of like a bunch of his cabinet appointees. And there were like 20 billionaires, 40 billionaires, something like that. I mean, it's wow. Shocking the amount of wealth is there. But Trump has taken now to bragging about this in private meetings, saying, he had Larry Ellison down there for a meeting. He said, I got the two richest guys in the world right here, and they're for Trump. And so as long as Elon's presence strokes Trump's ego, I think he's got, a place in the inner circle.
There's a long runway.
But Trump is Trump. Eventually, he seems to break with everybody around him.
It's also clear that, like, there are people in Trump's inner circle who do not appreciate having the competition. And, like, that's a potential vector for conflict. Mm-hmm. Also, just like Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy, I mentioned those three goals. There's also like a fourth goal, which is like Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, has political ambitions, and maybe it means running for governor of Ohio or something like that. So, which, by the way, DOGE conveniently ends like just in time for that.
Josh, we appreciate you joining us, and we will have you back on again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
So, Max, Dana, we also need to talk about how the Trump trade continues to go swimmingly well for all things Elon Musk. The Tesla stock, Dana, is now up, give or take, 50 some odd % since the election. And earlier this morning was within a whisker of a record high. But SpaceX is soaring. Max, I believe there is a sale coming up soon that's going to put a new valuation on it, correct?
Yeah, we've reported that they're talking about a $350 billion valuation on a tender offer. That is an offer to buy existing shareholders out. I'm thinking probably a lot of early employees or early investors. Now, remember, SpaceX is a privately held company, although it's a privately held company that has been privately held for a very long time and raised venture capital funding. So you have early investors who periodically want to be able to sell stock the way they would if it were a public company. And so you have these periodic tender offers, and $350 billion is a lot bigger than the last offer. I think the last one, which was just not even a year ago, was $210 billion. Yeah. So you're seeing a huge markup.
Just 60 some odd percent.
Honestly, roughly in line with the price increase that we've seen at Tesla Motors. And I think the case here at SpaceX...
It's a lot clear, no?
100%. It's way clear. Like, you totally...
So walk us through, why am I paying suddenly this huge premium for SpaceX?
You're paying the huge premium because SpaceX management and Elon Musk and probably a lot of investors feel like their prospects are better under President-elect Trump. SpaceX, as we've talked about many times, it's a rocket company. It operates this internet business, but what it really is a large defense contractor. So its biggest customer is the U.S. government. There are lots of ways that already the U.S. government buys a ton from SpaceX, but there are ways that the Trump administration has sort of already proposed to give SpaceX even more money. And not only, so you could talk about Starlink, there are these potential subsidies. Trump has already picked or designated chair of the FCC who's very pro Elon Musk and who seems, poised to funnel some of that money for rural broadband his way. There's the possibility of a Mars program. And then there's just the general sense that if Elon Musk is going up against Boeing or Lockheed, he's going to have a better argument today than he did just a couple months ago.
And I believe, Max, that SpaceX is now the most valuable private company or the most valuable startup in the world, something to that effect?
I think the most valuable privately held company in the world. Although, again, like, these distinctions are not as meaningful as you might think, because SpaceX has kind of operated as a pseudo public, right? It's been around for a long time. It's very different from like what we normally think of as like
startup.
A startup. Yeah.
Fine, fair. Having said that, if there were ever a time to actually take this company public, my God, I would think it's right now, right? Like,
I totally disagree. Why? Okay, sorry. Elon Musk does not really like being a public company CEO. Remember, in 2018, he tried to take Tesla private. That failed. But there is far more regulatory oversight when you are a public company. You go public when you need to raise money from the capital markets. Elon doesn't really need to raise money right now. He's got plenty of private investors willing to sink in. I mean, they've talked about potentially spinning Starlink off and having an IPO for Starlink, but SpaceX itself, I would not be surprised if Elon keeps that private. He likes to run private companies.
I would just say this. If there's ever a time to sell it, it's now. I.e., you may be right. Maybe Elon being Elon, he says, I don't ever want to sell it. But for the love of God, I mean, right now, there is a frenzy around all of his companies that, Max, you sell high. Are you not selling high right now?
Now, I think what Dan is saying, though, is that like Elon has a special relationship with SpaceX. And this is a company, as much as we've talked about this ongoing pay dispute, which is partly a dispute over equity and how much control Elon has over Tesla, he wants to run SpaceX as his, as the CEO, as the only decider. And that changes if you're public. Yeah. I do think Starlink,
as he's seeing again and again with Tesla and the lawsuit in Delaware and all that.
We should keep an eye on Starlink because he has, as Dan is suggesting, like he's floated that as a possibility. I don't think it's clear that Starlink's financials look that great yet, and that might be one reason why we haven't seen an IPO yet. I think it's also worth keeping an eye on some of these other companies, right? The Boring Company is another one that I would be...
We haven't talked about the Boring Company in months.
I would be shocked if there aren't people who are in that company or work there who are not talking about increasing the valuation there because clearly that is another company that could benefit from Trump. And actually Musk suggested on Twitter very recently, maybe it was overnight, that maybe the Boring Company would build a tunnel from New York to London. Now, my tunnel map, he was going to do it for 1,000x cheaper than the competition. But even so, that would be a pretty big contract.
So far, haven't they only done
it's like a mile or two in Las Vegas. So definitely a long way to go.
I guess you got the proof of concept.
I should say, to be fair, it may be like several miles in Las Vegas. They are expanding, but it's pretty small compared to New York to London. But I really think the one we should be looking at most seriously is Twitter, X, because that has outside investors. There are these other companies that it could combine with. I think there are definitely bankers out there who are thinking about that as a possible, take public via some sort of transaction, whether it's an IPO or some sort of, dare I say, a merger with Truth Social.
That's not happening. You have to stop pushing that idea.
I mean, again, I think that Musk is very frustrated by being a public CEO. And I guess in the case of X or Twitter, he wouldn't be the CEO, it would be Linda, right? But he's running a public company, he's running private companies. He's got 6 companies, 5 of them are private. I think that if he ever took anything public, he would weigh it very carefully about what's the upside. And the main reason why you go public is to raise money from the capital markets. I think that Elon is kind of a unicorn in that he doesn't really need to go public at this juncture, at this phase in his career to raise money. He's got scores of longtime friends and VCs and banks and foreign funds and sovereign wealth funds all clamoring to get into his businesses. And so unless there's a real financial need, okay, we need to raise $5 billion to go to Mars, I just don't see the impetus for what the upside would be for him going public.
Dana, you need to leave us, so jump and we'll see you soon.
See you next week.
Okay, Max, so you finally, dude, you got a feud, or you think you got a feud.
This is a feud watch. It's not a feud warning or an evacuation order. It's just a watch. I mentioned earlier the ongoing feud watch that is Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Correct.
I want to bring up a second one, which is Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida and potential rival to Trump. Well, so Elon Musk's America PAC, the Political Action Committee that we've talked about, actually employed a bunch of people from Ron DeSantis's orbit. Now, at the same time, you've had this question that's like sort of hanging over Republican politics over who is going to be the senator, who's going to replace Marco Rubio if he's indeed confirmed Secretary of State. There have been names floated that are sort of DeSantis allies, and then there is Lara Trump, who just stepped down from the RNC and who Elon Musk has endorsed. So again, it feels like maybe Trump and DeSantis, assuming they're able to work this out, this feud will just peter out like a sort of limp tropical storm somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. But it does feel like Elon and DeSantis, and really Elon and these other potential Trump rivals, are worth paying attention to. So that's one that I'm watching.
All right, I just got to say that having waited weeks, maybe months for a feud, I don't know. I'm slightly underwhelmed.
I'm sorry.
I just thought, dude, like after months, I just assumed you were going to come with something bigger, bolder than like maybe possibly 1 in 10 shot. Okay, we move on. We go to the mailbag. The mailbag's going to be great. So we've gotten some mail sent into our email address, eloninc@
Bloomberg.net. Please keep sending in questions, suggestions. We're really enjoying getting them. Even the hostile ones are joyful to read.
There have been plenty of hostile ones.
And we got some great suggestions for bumper stickers, in my opinion.
Those that have come in specifically on Elon. The winner so far comes in from a gentleman by the name of Matt O. And it was, I bought this Tesla before Elon bought Trump, which is pretty clever.
I mean, it's definitely clever. I feel like journalistically, we would add if Bloomberg would not put that on the headline of a story, but as a quip, I think it's it's got something. I think it's worth working with. I'm still open to other bumper stickers.
Well, there was a runner-up, and I will name now. But absolutely, positively, keep the bumper sticker ideas coming in, whether they be for the show or whether they be for Elon himself. Okay, so the runner-up comes in from Brad, and it starts off with something that's sort of unspeakable. The FCC wouldn't allow us to air it, but it ends up with a simple but effective "get over it."
I like that. Yeah, that's a strong pro-Elon message.
Pro-Elon message. That's good. Like if you strip out the front half, which we have to strip out again here just because we can't speak
like
it
you
on
put
air,
that on the back of your Cybertruck.
That's good. Max, as always, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Anna Masarakis is our editor, and Rayhan Harmansi is our senior editor. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and Emma Sanchez fact-checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporters Joel Weber and Brad Stone. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.